All right, looks like we're live everywhere we want to be live. Good evening, everybody. It's Carol Williams with Williams Immigration, and I am the managing attorney and owner of Williams Immigration. We're a boutique immigration law firm, and we help businesses and families navigate our U.S. immigration system for our business folks and our entrepreneurs. We help them make sure that they themselves, if they're the entrepreneur and the business owner, have the right work authorization, and then when they start hiring people that may not be U.S. citizens, we make sure that their employees have the right work authorization. And then we will also help employers sponsor employees for green cards. And then for my families, we help U.S. citizens sponsor their family members for green cards. So that's going to be a spouse, a fiance, a dependent child, or a parent. And it's, I guess I never really say this, but dependent children, the important thing to know that for the dependent children are children that are under 21 and unmarried. So if you are 20 and you get married, you no longer qualify as a dependent under your parents. So just keep that in mind. I wanted to come on tonight and talk about the upcoming changes to the naturalization application. We had read something last week maybe about possible changes, maybe an essay being thrown into the citizenship mix. Well, then we heard yesterday that they were releasing it today, releasing what the changes were going to be. So we've got the changes. They were released today. They were published today. So I wanted to let you guys know what those were. And currently there are 100 possible questions that are all released on the USCIS website for the civics test. That 100 will now, under the new rule, be 128 questions, 128 possible questions to the citizenship test. You will be asked 20 of those questions, and you will need to get 12 correct. So they will keep asking questions. They will keep asking you up to that 20 question mark until you get 12 correct. Once you get 12, if you get the first 12, they will not ask you the remaining questions, but you'll have 20 questions in order to get 12 correct. And so this may take a little bit, maybe a couple months-ish before it's actually implemented. So if you file your citizenship application more than 30 days after this new rule goes into effect, then you will be under the new citizenship application rules. But if your application is already filed, or if you file before this rule goes into effect, then you will be under the current rules and the current, just 100 questions and what have you. So really now, like some of these changes are similar to what the current White House administration wanted to do during their first administration. They just didn't have the time to implement them all. So the changes are a little bit different. But the goal is more vetting, make the application harder, because it is the highest benefit that the Immigration Service approves for people. U.S. citizenship is the pinnacle of their services towards their stakeholders. So if you qualify for U.S. citizenship, now is the time to apply. While before the changes happen. So that is really what I wanted to tell you all about. That is what came out today. That is published in the Federal Register. So you can certainly go take a peek at that if you like. It's a fairly short, I actually have it up. It's a fairly short notice, page-wise. Usually some of these notices are like hundreds and hundreds of pages, but this one's fairly short. And it, so it talks about the current rule, the new rule. So if you are interested, you can certainly take a look at that. But it's going to be more difficult. So, keep that in mind. And if citizenship is what you are thinking about, and if you qualify, then you should think about applying now before the rules change. And let's see, if y'all have any questions, I'm more than happy to see if I can provide you some general answers. As always, while I am an immigration attorney, I am not your immigration attorney, so I cannot give you specific legal advice on your own cases. This is educational only. What do we have? Someone's asking, what about Haitian paroles? What do you mean, what about Haitian paroles? Although I may not be the best person to ask because I typically don't handle paroles, but maybe if you kind of tell me a little bit more, what are you wondering about Haitian paroles? Well, give you a minute to put that question in. Someone is asking who are trying to get citizenship. Lots of people are applying for citizenship. For folks that are applying for citizenship, if you're married to a U.S. citizen, then you can apply 3 years after you receive green card status, receive your green card or lawful permanent resident status. I use the two interchangeably. That includes your conditional permanent residence as well. So a lot of people are sort of curious about that. So it's 3 years after you receive either your conditional residence or your which is a 2-year card, or your permanent residence, which is a 10-year card. If you're not married to a U.S. citizen, then you have to wait 5 years after you become a lawful permanent resident or get your green card in order to apply for U.S. citizenship. What other questions? How long are I-130s taking? Let me go on live for 1 second. Processing times are, for the most part, not all, but most processing times are actually on the USCIS website. And that is where I'm going now. But processing times are going to depend on what type of application you are filing and which office has your application. And I-130, the processing time will depend on those things. And it will depend on whether or not it is an immediate relative, whether or not it's a preference category. But for illustrative purposes, right now, an immediate relative application, let's see here, taking roughly 17 months, but that's for immediate relative. But I would recommend for anybody that's questioning or doesn't know or wants to know how long applications are taking, the USCIS website is actually extremely good about that. If you go to the homepage, everything is in a box, the way that whoever created the website. So if you go to the box on the homepage that says manage your case, check on the second tab, which is check processing times. You'll have 3 drop-down menus. The first one is where you choose your form. The second one is you choose the category, because most forms contain more than one category that you can apply for that benefit. And then the third is service center or field office or service center, and that tells you which office is processing your case. And then you hit get processing time, and that will give you roughly 70 to 80% of what the agency is processing for similar cases. But for, let's say, an immediate relative I-130, standalone, just the I-130, it's taken about 17 months. If you are processing an I-130 in a preference category, it could be longer. It's probably going to be a little bit longer. There's a question here about asylum seeker that are already in the country out of status. My office doesn't handle asylum, so I'm definitely not the best person to give you any sort of info on that. Let's see here. super nervous. My hubs applies for, I'm guessing, citizenship next year. He got his green card without an interview. Well, congratulations on getting the green card without an interview. Those days are kind of over. So that's great. If he's not applying until next year, assuming there are no challenges or what have you to this new citizenship rule, he probably is going to be taking the application. He probably will be taking the new citizenship test that was rolled out today. I would, if I were him, I would start studying the 100 questions that are already on the USCIS website. They're only really going to add 28 questions to that. So whenever they release those in maybe a couple of months, he can then add those 28 into the mix, and that is one less thing that he'll need to worry about. So that's what I would do. But I wouldn't be nervous. If he's not applying until next year, you've got plenty of time, or he has plenty of time rather. So good luck to him when he does apply. What else do we have? I heard after 9 months you can escalate. Escalate what? Escalate what? So typically when we're talking about reaching out to USCIS to see what the status is, if you go onto the website, go through the process I just explained about checking the status, once you get an answer to that, so once it tells you, hey, it's taking us, 15 months or whatever, 12 months, 6 months, whatever it is, if you scroll down further, it will give you, hold on, I can actually tell you what it will tell you. Let's see here. Let's see, stops processing time. If you scroll down further, it'll give you a prompt, or it'll say, when can I ask about my case? And then it will ask you to put in your receipt date. So let's just put in some, just anything. 25. So it'll tell you, just for the dummy information that I put in, it says your case is processing normally. The earliest you can submit questions is August 7th, 2026. That is just based on just the sort of the random dummy information that I put in. But you would obviously put in your actual receipt date and, all the right information, and it'll tell you, one, whether or not it's within normal processing times, and two, it'll tell you whether or not they would like you to submit an inquiry. Now, I'm not going to say that I always pay attention to and abide by the date that they want people to wait to submit an inquiry. I find that sometimes that inquiry date is sort of outside of the processing time itself. But, depending on if you're like just outside of processing times or just inside of processing times, depending on what your particular situation is, will really depend on whether or not I tell people, let's go ahead and push a little bit more to see if we can get, get a status from them. But that's a really good piece of the USCIS website, because sometimes I know we feel like we file our applications and we feel like they're just sitting in a black hole. You always kind of want to start when you give a processing time question, and you always want to kind of start with the USCIS website. Let me see here. I've been on TPS for 4 years now. I didn't overstay my visa. Can I apply for asylum? You have chosen two areas of immigration that I do not handle, TPS and asylum. So I am definitely not the best person to ask. Can a person out of status still get a green card through marriage? Yes, they can. But they cannot, depending on how they entered the country, will depend on whether or not they can remain in the country and adjust their status, or whether or not they have to go outside of the U.S. and consular process at a U.S. consulate. So the short answer is yes. It's just the strategy that is involved, and whether or not you would actually have to leave the country, and then a process at a U.S. consulate with a waiver in hand. What else do we have? Let's see here. Hold on. Oh, this is a good question. So if you've been following me for the past, I don't know, probably the past week or so, I've been talking about the new USCIS good moral character. What types of volunteering would USCIS consider good moral character for citizenship? We don't know. We have no idea. They haven't told us. So we're my colleagues and I are taking a not a wait and see approach, but a wait and see approach. We're waiting to see what they don't like, what they kind of throw at us in that respect. I haven't seen anything negative thus far, so we don't know. We're just kind of waiting on them, and sometimes that's what happens. Like CIS will change the rules or change a policy on us, and they'll tell us what the new policy is, and we're kind of left kind of guessing. So I was having this conversation last night with some other non-immigration attorneys, and explaining to them how the immigration attorneys are very, very collegial group of folks, especially if we're practicing in the same area, or if we've lived in an area and practiced, even if we've moved out of that area. The geographic area. Immigration attorneys are very, very collegial group of folks. So we're often talking with one another and sharing information. And I just haven't had anything negative come up thus far with good moral character as it pertains to citizenship cases. So I don't really have anything on that, but that's one of the things that my colleagues and I talk about often right now. So, for removal of conditions to get a 10-year green card, what is the most important requirement to submit? So there isn't one piece of evidence that is more important than another one. The agency wants to see that you are still married, still sort of in it to win it, still doing all the things that they think a married couple should be doing. So it's not really one piece of, it's not one document that's more important than another. They look at your entire application as a whole. And I think that's actually a really good question. I get sort of a variation of that question often with all of the visa categories. I especially get that question when it comes to employment-based applications. What does the agency want to see? Like what's the best piece of evidence to submit or whatever? They don't that's not really how they look at applications. It's not what one document is gonna kind of throw you over into getting an approval. They really do look at the entire application. Window, hold on. My I-45 was due to the I-864 not denied, maybe? It was due to the I-864 not being not properly being filed. What can I do? I think you mean denied. It would depend if you can try to get them to reopen it. You can file a new I-45. It really depends. A lot of that will depend on whether or not whether you have underlying status. What about the I-864 was not accurate? Do you need a new I-864? Do you need a joint sponsor? It's a host. I have way more questions than I sort of have, sort of like solid thoughts on that. Let's see. What are the options for a newly revoked F1 holder while here? Really depends on why the F1 was revoked. F1s were being revoked en masse, maybe a couple months ago now. So some of those international students were part of several lawsuits that were happening, but it really depends on why your F1 was revoked. If it was revoked because you violated your status, then we gotta kind of look and see what happened there. So it really depends on why it was revoked. And whether or not your school is willing to reinstate you, like, kind of depends on a whole host of things. Is this a career you can feel passionate about? That is not a question I can actually answer for you, right? It depends on whether or not you feel passionate about it. I can tell you my colleagues and I do. It's what we've chosen to do for our careers, but it depends on whether or not it depends on what gets you motivated. It depends on what you like to do. You're 18. I would think about, what do you like to do? What makes you excited? There are a zillion and one types of lawyers, so if you want to be a lawyer, I would go shadow a couple of different lawyers. I think one of the most important things that I realized was what type of law I didn't want to practice. That is super important. It's super important to have boundaries around what you don't want to practice, as well as what you do want to practice. But that's a great question. Can one overcome marriage fraud? Depends, which is an answer I know nobody likes to hear from lawyers, but it depends. It depends on the facts. It's very fact intensive. Why? One, I would say, did the Immigration Service actually deny because of marriage fraud? Did they specifically say because of marriage fraud? And two, what were the actual facts? And is what the Immigration Service articulated in the denial notice, are those facts accurate? If they are not, or if you do not think they're accurate, why do you think they are not accurate? Did people get nervous at the interview? And maybe they think they didn't articulate as well as they thought they were. Did the officer just not particularly take good notes and misremember things? I don't know, right? So it really depends on why the officer thought it was fraud. But the short answer is yes, you can overcome marriage fraud. It's but it's not going to be every case of marriage fraud can be overcome. It really is very, very fact dependent. Thanks for the hearts and glitter, guys. I like them. Hold on. Everything else is approved. I-45 has been pending 540 days. What do I recommend? I don't know what the underlying basis of your I-45 is. So without that knowledge, 540 days may seem like a lot. It may not seem like a lot. But 540 days in and of itself seems like a lot, but I don't know if there's a reason for that, right? I don't know if there is a waiver that is in play. I don't know if there's a criminal background that's in play. I don't know the facts. So does 540 days sound like a lot? Yes. But I also don't know the category. The category itself could make the 540 days not a lot at all. So it's really kind of fact dependent. Let's see. I applied for a sibling to come. How long do you think it takes to even get an interview? That's a really good question. You're not going to like my answer, though. I can guarantee you. Hold on. So siblings are the absolute longest on the visa bulletin. U.S. sibling applications right now, they, in October, because I'm looking at the October dates, in October, I-130s for siblings that were filed before January 8th of 2008 will be eligible to have either their 45s processed or their interviews scheduled at consulates. So it's going to take quite some time. The way that the visa bulletin is done, it's a filing for a sibling is the last preference category. It's the fourth preference category for family-based cases. So those cases take a very long time, and it is all chargeability. So they're processing, let me say that again, they're processing cases in January that were received before January 8th, 2008 for individuals that are not from India, Mexico, and the Philippines. China usually is also set aside, but China happens to have the same priority date. So if I were you, I would take a look at the visa bulletin, which you can find on the Department of State website, and see and watch that movement. But it's going to take some time. It is not going to be a quick process to get an interview. Often when I talk to folks that want to sponsor their siblings, we can certainly file for your sibling. We can file that I-130, really as a backup. But we always try to look for another avenue for that sibling to get a green card or to come into the U.S. Just because we know that sibling applications take a very long time. Uh, 86 days from filing to oath, swear-in. I passed my N400 interview. Congratulations. That's awesome. When was your interview? Remind me when your interview was. That is fantastic. That's very cool. 86 days from filing to oath swearing. That's very cool. I feel like you're probably in a local office that doesn't have a lot of naturalization cases, which is very cool. So congratulations, because y'all know I love to celebrate a win, even if my office has zero to do with it. So I am super, super excited for you. That's awesome. I'm going to give you a little bit of a warning, though. It's going to take a minute for you to change everything. So don't forget, once you get your citizenship, you're going to need to change your you're going to need to alert Social Security Administration so that they can issue you a new Social Security card. Your new card will not have any language on it about DHS work authorization required for employment. So you want to make sure that you reach out to Social Security and get a new Social Security card and let them know. It's probably not going to be the quickest process. They need to, because they're not going to take your word for it, understandably. So they're going to need to go and check their system. They're going to need to go ping the DHS system, and then they will do it. But make sure that you do that once you get now that you have your naturalization certificate, you can apply for a U.S. passport. So just make sure that you, the other thing you want to look at is all states are a little bit different on this. Check your driver's license and see if your driver's license has language on it that kind of limits you because you were previously a lawful permanent resident, but now you're a citizen. So check that as well. If your state does that, you want to go to your Department of Motor Vehicles and get that changed as well. A good way to check that without actually going in there first is getting onto your DMV website, because usually they'll have examples. They'll have actually photo examples where you can look at photo online, look at your photo, and see what's going on there. But those are a couple things that you should do now that you're a citizen. But congratulations, that's very exciting. Let's see here. How bad does a DUI from 10 years ago affect my case? Filing an I-130, 485 marriage based. I mean, I'm not going to say it's not going to impact it. But listen, immigration is going to look at everything. It's not, they're absolutely going to look at everything. The current administration said really before day one, said it on the campaign trail, said it on day one, has continued to say it, has been very consistent about saying it. They are going for increased vetting. So the best thing I can tell people to do is when they have a criminal background, DUI, misdemeanor, felony, whatever it is, have a conversation with a lawyer who can do the analysis of that crime and how it will potentially impact your immigration case. A DUI in one state is not the same as a DUI in another state. Each state has their own specific requirements for someone to be considered guilty of a crime or to have committed that crime, right? A DUI in Rhode Island may not have the exact same criteria as a DUI in California. And so the state law really impacts how the immigration service will look at the crime itself, and then whether or not it has a negative impact on your immigration case. And another thing about having a criminal background, just because you were charged with a misdemeanor in state court does not mean that crime is like not a big deal when it comes to immigration. So just keep that in mind. I hear so often people are like, oh, I just had a misdemeanor. It's no big deal. You don't need to know about it. I do need to know about it. That's why I'm asking, right? So keep that in mind. Crimes are absolutely looked at by USCIS, but the underlying elements of the state crime are super, super important. And I actually have to jump off, so I'm going to answer like maybe a couple more questions, and then and then I will be back. What's today? Thursday. I'll be back on Monday. Let me see. Can having Medi-Cal affect citizenship? I'm assuming that's like a California state medical insurance. Maybe, I don't know. That's what I'm assuming. I don't know. I think I know what Medi-Cal is, but I don't know enough about it to really sort of answer that question. I would reach out to probably assuming I'm correct and it's a California thing, I would reach out to a California immigration attorney who probably can answer that question for you like super fast. Hold on, let me see here. My wife is mad at me and wants a divorce. I am sorry to hear that. That is never a good situation to be in. Let me see here. 2 years ago, NBC said my visa number is available, but USCIS says 45 is pending since under F2A. So that kind of doesn't make sense to me. You wouldn't be dealing with NVC if you also have a 45 that's pending. So something in there is not quite making sense. NVC, you work with NVC when you are processing your application through the consulate. Your 45 tells me that there is an application for your green card here in the US. So NVC really doesn't have a role when you are processing through USCIS. While NVC and USCIS communicate, they wouldn't, NVC shouldn't have a role once you file your 45. So I don't know enough of the history of that to understand why you've got correspondence coming from NVC when you have a 45 that's pending. Let me see here. This is a fabulous question, so we're going to go out on this question. I filed for USCIS about a week ago. How long would it take for me to know what I should do next? So I don't actually know what you filed, but I think it's a great question. So here's what I kind of have to say about this. Typically, what will happen in all applications that are filed with USCIS, you file, then you get a receipt notice that comes in the mail. Depending on the type of case that you have filed, because you didn't say, you might get a biometric notice, or you might get a whole lot of silence, right? Which nobody likes, right? That's when people start to feel that their case is gone down a black hole. So once your application is filed, everyone should get a receipt notice. Some receipt notice based on case type are taking much longer than others. If the Immigration Service wants biometrics from you, they will send you a biometric notice. Essentially, now that it's filed, USCIS is going to tell you what they want. But what they're not going to do is sort of give you regular updates. If you have set up a My USCIS account, you can check your My USCIS account, or you can go to the USCIS website and check the standard processing times. That will give you roughly the timing of 80% of cases that are similar to yours in terms of processing time. But now that your case is filed, it's kind of a lot of hurry up and wait and exercise all the patience that our parents told us that we should have, but that we don't have, including myself. So yeah, that is kind of what happens. That is very, very broad brushstrokes of what happens when you file an application. But generally, USCIS will absolutely tell you what they want next. Whether they want biometrics, whether they have questions, those questions will come in the form of a request for further evidence. If they don't think that you have filed enough, they can give you a notice of intent to deny. If you filed absolutely nothing for them to make a decision on and have no, not even have anything for them, the basis of questions, they can issue you a straight up denial notice. So it really depends on what type of case you filed, it just depends. But at this point, once it's filed, the Immigration Service will tell you pretty much when they want something or need something from you. Yeah. But I am always checking the processing times for my clients. That is one thing that we always do. So I always recommend, if people are impatient like myself, it's helpful to know how to check the processing times and where to get them from. And you can get them on the USCIS.gov website. So that is all I have for y'all tonight, because I have to jump off and prepare some stuff for tomorrow. But I will be back on Monday. Let me check my calendar real quick. I think Monday. I don't think I have anything going on Monday night. Yes, I'll be back Monday. I'll be back live with y'all on Monday evening around 7-ish Eastern Standard Time. So it's kind of early enough in the evening for my West Coast people, kind of not too late at night for my East Coast people. But if you want to work with us, with my team, you can click the link in the bio, schedule a consult. All my clients start with a consult so that I can get the lay of the land, see what's going on. You guys have an opportunity then to ask me really specific questions about your case. And then we come up with a strategy during that meeting. For those of you that are on, that I see a few familiar names. It's good to see you again. And for my follower who is now a newly minted U.S. citizen, congratulations. That is very, very, very exciting. And I will see you guys all again on Monday. Talk to you soon.